We want to know more about this issue with Mr. Nizar Farsakh, political analyst. We will discuss further the possibilities of an agreement or disagreement between Iran and the United States. Mr. Nizar, I want to start with the first question. To what extent is there a possibility of negotiation between the United States and Iran, given that Iran has so far refused to negotiate directly with the United States?
It's unclear. I would think it's like 50%, 50-50. It might be that the Trump administration is moving all of these military assets in order to put pressure on Iran. But it could well be that the United States does intend to attack Iran.
In case of further tensions in the Middle East, to what extent is Iran ready to enter another war? And how economically prepared is the United States to engage in a new war in the region?
Well, for sure, Iran doesn't want to start a war. It knows that a war is to its disadvantage. However, if the US and or Israel attack, most probably they will do their best to prolong the war, to make it more costly for the US, because they know that the Trump administration does not want long wars. Trump has said that he doesn't want to get embroiled in the Middle East. So the attack would be just to improve the American negotiating position at the negotiation table. And we don't know if Iran does have the capacity to at least minimize the damage from the attacks, because last time Israel attacked, Israel managed to destroy the majority of Iran's radars and defense systems. So now Iran is more vulnerable or will get damaged more, will have more destruction if there is a war.
Is there any possibilities of a response from Iran? We know that Iran has lost much of its regional hegemony, but it still maintains influence through several armed groups in the region. The Houthis remain strong. Could Iran respond differently in the event of an attack?
They will, but they won't have as many assets as they had before. When Hezbollah was strong and they had assets in Syria and in Iraq, they had many options, and they could sustain a longer response. Now they only have the Houthis. The Houthis could damage American ships, could send more missiles to Israel, but the capacity of Iran to defend itself is deteriorated a lot since the last Israeli attack on Iran.
As we have seen, Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held a meeting. Many discussions were apparently made there. Saturday's meeting was also announced following that. What could be the consequences, especially regarding Gaza and the potential de-escalation of tensions around Israel? What role can the United States play?
For sure, they will be coordinating the attack on Iran. What would each party do? The US has requested from Israel to avoid or not to attack Iranian nuclear facilities. So definitely the two parties are going to discuss coordination and the plans. And as far as the Gaza Strip, of course, negotiations about the hostage release and how long Israel still needs as far as military attacks on the Gaza Strip, because again, the Trump administration wants to end the Gaza war sooner rather than later, while the Israeli Prime Minister, now that he has managed to pass the budget in Israel, he's in a much better political position, and therefore he can afford to take risks and continue the war in order to avoid being taken to court in Israel. So there is divergence of goals and interests between Trump and Bibi Netanyahu.
What we see this time from Netanyahu seemed different. He appeared somehow concerned about Turkey. Why is Netanyahu worried about Turkey? Is it because of Turkey's growing influence in Syria? What might he have discussed with Donald Trump that could be seen as a warning sign for Turkey?
Indeed, the fall of the Assad regime and the fact that the current rulers of Syria are direct allies of Turkey gives Turkey a lot of leverage in Syria and therefore very close to the Israeli border and complicates things for Israel. At the same time, Turkey is a very important NATO ally. There are interests for the US with Turkey, of course, the American bases in Turkey, and so on and so forth. So most probably, Bibi Netanyahu and Trump are going to discuss what role Turkey is going to have in the region and how to make sure that the more prominent role that Turkey plays does not come at the expense of Israeli interests. So it's probably going to look into what could Israel and the US give Turkey so that Turkey does not take a bigger portion of the geopolitical space in the Middle East.
Mr. Nizar, I would like to shift to another topic. What we have discussed so far is largely the result of US President Donald Trump's decisions. Previously, he imposed tariffs on neighboring countries, targeting a massive reaction and shaking the global economy market. The world's economy is currently in a fragile state. Tell us, to what extent could these tariffs imposed by Donald Trump on exports and goods harm the United States itself?
Actually, my reading is, given the very negative reaction of the world global market to the tariffs and the criticism that the Trump administration is getting, a war with Iran would be a convenient distraction and allows him to have the news focus on the war and not on the economic challenges. Because he also believes that with time, given some time, the American economy will benefit ultimately in the long run from those tariffs. But that is, a lot of economists disagree with that assessment, but that is what Trump believes. He's betting on that.
Didn't he risk his allies leaving him? Now, Europe is truly very determined. They say the US cannot impose sanctions on us without also imposing sanctions on Russia. Doesn't this cause the United States to gradually lose its allies?
Well, the US is too important for the different countries in the globe, for countries to stop being allies of the US, unfortunately, right? So they do not have that leverage. But of course, there will be less cooperation, maybe less coordination with the US, which impacts the US a little bit, but not a lot. And Trump is willing to take that risk in order to reassert or assert in a more stronger way the US hegemony in the globe and make sure that all the other countries in the globe make sure to prioritize American interest and not undermine American interests.
Economically, China has become a dominant power in the region. Is this tariff more than what the US has imposed on China before? Wouldn't it lead to a heavy economic war between the two countries and eventually harming the entire world?
It will. The size of the American economy and the Chinese economy are such that if they are not on the same page, that has a huge impact on the globe because they make such a big portion of global trade. We've seen the Chinese leadership being sanguine and judicious in how they deal with the Trump administration in his first term. So with all the rhetoric and the brinksmanship that the Trump administration is showing, I think ultimately the Chinese government will work out some sort of accommodation while at the same time keeping a very combative rhetoric on the political scene. But on the ground, I think as far as policy, I think both China and the US know better than to jeopardize their economic relationship.
I want to draw your attention back to the Middle East. Iraq is one of the countries that will be exposed to the sparks of this conflict, whether it wants it or not. In the event of a US attack on Iran, Iran has issued a strong warning to countries hosting US military bases, stating that any assistance to the United States would make them a target as well, viewed as enemies. What could be Iran's reaction, especially toward a country like Iraq?
Well, definitely they'll take advantage of that and attack American bases or bases of the Iraqi government, because it's going to consider that the Iraqi government cooperated with the US. In fact, the Iranians have announced or warned all the countries in the Gulf, as well as Turkey and Syria, that if they allow American or Israeli planes over their airspace, or allow the US to use its bases in those countries like Qatar and Bahrain, the Iranians will attack them. So I think the Americans will not put its allies in that position, and will do its attacks, start its attacks from other bases like Diego Garcia, as we've seen the movement, a lot of military assets to Diego Garcia, as well as, of course, the aircraft carriers.
Is it true that in the event of an attack on Iran, only airstrikes would be carried out? Is there any chance of a ground invasion? Because, as we know, geopolitically, Iran is somewhat distant from other countries for the United States.
It's highly unlikely, unless there is a very important target, let's say a very important area of a nuclear facility that requires special forces to take it out. I do not see the Americans or the Israelis, for that matter, to actually have boots on the ground. Their goals can be achieved through aerial bombardment without the need to actually have boots on the ground.
Well, Mr. Nazar, this is the last question I want to ask you regarding Saturday's meeting involving the United States, Israel, and Iran. I want to know your impression about it. Is there any chance that these three countries could engage in a negotiation and de-escalate tensions in the Middle East?
Unfortunately, I think it's highly unlikely they will come to an agreement. There is so much has changed since October 7th. The whole geopolitical map has got reshaped and continues to be shaped, also with the fall of the Assad regime. So the parties have too many variables on their plate, so it's very hard to see how they can agree on anything, to be honest.
It was a pleasure to have Mr. Nazar Farsakh, political analyst, with us from Washington. Thank you so much.